I remember thinking, how the hell did you fold your, how the hell did you keep all of your homework that impeccable? Like there aren't even ruffles on the side of on the corners of your pages. Like, how did you fold that so perfectly? Like, do you practice that? Like, and the handwriting is like, some of the handwriting was really like crispy, and I was like, damn. But I didn't even have any desire to try to be like that. I was just like, whatever. But it was boring. They didn't ask me. They didn't, what I really, 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 really wished that they would do, and maybe I should have voiced my opinions more, but my parents were like really like freaked out about me. Like my parents didn't like me. My parents saw, I mean, they loved me and everything, but they saw me, especially in that time area, they saw me as a threat. They saw me as a obstacle. They saw me as something that they needed to fight. So if I ever said anything like about expressing my opinions, they would have just attacked me and told me to like be normal, you know, like if I would have said, oh, they're not, I wish we had a class where we could write. I wish we had a class where we could just write. I want to write, you know, I want to express my creativity, and then, you know, and get to read my story to the class. You know, my parents would have been like, well, then write. And I'd be like, no, I wish there was a class where you could write, like school credit for it, you know? And then, I don't know, they were just always like getting angry with me if I ever had like an issue. Like I had to obey and like be and agree with everything that the way the system was, and agree with it. And if I didn't, then that was like, I was like a mentally ill, bad kid. And so, yeah, they had me trying to get me on pills. They tried to get me on all these different pills, man. Every year it was like it was a different drug, because my mom was a psychiatric nurse, and so she dealt with that kind of stuff and was really into it. Tried to get me on, well, I mean, right now my mom's always trying to get me on Dexedrine. And then she tried to get me on lithium when I was in college. And then there was these other drugs, Ritalin, and then some other one, Prozac. And then sending me off to these like psychologists, child psychologists. My mom made me go to a psychologist just like 3 years ago. And the guy's like, I remember you, man. I remember seeing you when you were a little kid, dude. And I was like, oh, God. But yeah, they had me, and they were like religious. They're like Buddhists, so they're always like dabbling, always like new kinds of like, my dad was into NLP for a while, went off to the NLP conferences like in Steamboat and stuff. And so they get these like weird psychologists to like be weird. Like some guy being like, so tell me about it, something. And I'd be like, and he'd be like, tell me more. And this guy just wasn't really good. And then some other guy was nice. But they had me to all these different people. Like there was something wrong with me, which pissed me off. And so then I'd fight them, and then I'd make them cry a couple times. But basically, I lived in a household where I was not supposed to rebel at all. And if I did, it was war between both of my parents. So basically, I just had to buck up and just do what everybody told me to do. In retrospect, what I should have done is just refused to go to school. Because there's nothing they could have done. They couldn't have kicked me out of the house. They couldn't have forced me to go to school. Maybe they would have sent me off to some like juvenile detention center area, but that would have been, or like some kind of boarding school or something, but you know, maybe that would have been better, because there would have been more like opportunity to have like some kind of an alternative, like encourage me to like express, you know, write my own thing, create my own thing. But yeah, school wasn't all that fun, dude. And then we had this other dude named Mr. Tidwell. No, that was Tidwell. Seemed like all of our teachers were like hillbillies. Tidwell was like some kind of a hillbilly dude. Really old too. They're really old teachers. They're all probably dead by now. Mrs. Robinson was like 70. And then she only taught us there at 7, like in like the first semester, or maybe the first year, because I guess she got a job at McDonald's, because all the kids were like, we saw her at McDonald's. And I went into a McDonald's once, and I think I saw her there actually working at a McDonald's. I think maybe she got fired or something. But then we had a science teacher named Mr. Oh my God, I can't remember. Mr. Whistler? There was a Mr. Whistler. I don't know if I ever had him. He was this like really old guy who was like really ugly. But I don't think I ever had him. But there was this other guy named Mr. Something who was like this really old guy with this really long beard. And he'd go on these like speeches, these like diatribes that had nothing to do with the science. Although science classes I enjoyed. I liked science class. But he would go off on the stories like about, he was like some kind of like, he's like, yeah, if anybody tries to break in my house, I'll kill him, man. You know, I call my friends bastard. I go, hey, you bastard. Because we're friends, but if anybody who's not my friend calls me a bastard, then I'll fucking kill him. You know, he was like, he was weird, man. But, but I remember it was in 7th grade, and he's like, raise your hand in this class if you're over 100 pounds. And I didn't raise my hand, so I was less than 100 pounds in 7th grade. And I think it was less than 5 feet tall, too. I was a little guy. And I hit puberty late, too. I didn't have hair on my dick until in 8th grade. In 7th grade, I didn't. Because I remember looking at other kids, and they had hair. But I didn't. I got it in like 8th grade or something. So I guess I was like a late bloomer. One kid, Nathaniel Daw. Or was it Nathaniel Daw? Because, yeah, he was in 7th grade. He was really hairy in 7th grade. And there was this 9th grader who was like really fucking hairy. But yeah, I didn't, all the girls were taller than me. I think in 8th grade too. I don't think it was until 9th grade where I started being like taller than most of the girls. But there were still some girls who were taller than me. But I was a little guy. I was like the shortest kid, shortest boy in the whole school. There were girls shorter than me, but there's like, yeah, maybe I was the shortest kid. I don't remember any kids who were shorter than me in 7th grade. But I got taller like towards the end of the year in 7th grade. Because there was this Spanish teacher named Mr. Roper. And I wasn't really good at languages either because they taught it really like, they taught it incrementally. They'd be like, this week we're going to do this. So they're like, yeah, and then this and this. And I would be like, and so then I would lose my interest. I couldn't focus if they're going to teach it so slowly. So that by the time they got to the next lesson, I didn't have the first one. And I mean, if you want to teach me right, you need to teach me all of it all at once. Teach me first, past, present, future. Teach me it all at once. And expect me to know it all right away. And if I don't, then it's kind of like up to me to figure it all out. And then you just kind of, I mean, you explain it all one at a time, but you do it really quickly. And then you review it. And then you review it again instead of like do the entire first 3 weeks on the first present because I'm going to get hazy and like fall asleep. But anyways, he was like the wrestling coach. And I remember him going like, no, but it's wrestling. It's real wrestling. It's not Hulk Hogan wrestling. So Hulk Hogan was a star in 87. So I joined the wrestling team and I wrestled some kid named Sean Fleming and we like tied, even though he was a lot taller than me. But then I wrestled Stuart Robertson and he like threw me down, like immediately just smacked me down. And I saw him like in class the next day or like in the hallway and he was with a bunch of kids and he's like, hey, you, how come you didn't show up for wrestling? How come you dropped out? And he was like way taller than me, like way bigger than me. But by the end of the year, I was as big as him. So I kind of hit my growth spurt like in 7th grade. But yeah, who was another teacher we had? We had this one dude named Mr. Reno, and maybe we didn't have him until 7th grade or until 8th grade, but he was a dick. I did not like him at all, and nobody liked him. He was just an asshole. He was really angry and all the time and just getting pissed off. And he's like got pissed off at me too, like, which is stupid. You don't want to get pissed off at me because I'm like the kid who's like the most, you know, obedient. I try to, you know, I never interrupt. I never show up late. I always turn the homework and assignment on time. But you know, sometimes I don't pay attention. And I think sometimes they thought that because I wasn't paying attention because I was just like bored, that I was like doing that on purpose. Because like one time he's like, I was writing with a pen, and you weren't supposed to write with a pen. Like, we were supposed to, like, be paying attention to him or something. He's like, yeah, you shouldn't be writing with a pen like this guy. And he points to me, and I was like, I thought that was overdoing it. But in ninth grade, we had the ninth grade off-campus committee, and he was like the teacher sponsor. And he'd proofread all of like our proposals we'd have to write to the school board and to the different merchants around there who were supposed to support us. And he was really cool then. He was really friendly to us then. And proofreading it. I think I was the only guy on that off-campus committee. It was like Bree Minger was the president. I was the secretary, so I was the guy who like typed it all up. And then like Gina Davis was something else. She was another girl. Those are the only people I remember, but it was like 5 or 6 people on it. Gina Davis wanted to be like an astronaut. She was the sister of, what's that other girl Davis? Susan Butcher. No, Gina Butcher was the sister of Susan Butcher, who won the Iditarod. She wanted to be an astronaut. And I asked her, I was like, do you want to be an astronaut because you like flying or because you like science? She was like, both. Cool. So that was interesting. She's the only kid who I knew who knew what she wanted to do. Although there was this other kid named Brian something or other. He was this like blonde kid who only hung out with girls, and I think he was gay. Cause he was like really emotional. He'd like cry and stuff, but he'd only hang out with girls, and like a lot of people would make fun of him all the time. And he was a figure skater, a competitive figure skater. Yeah, I think he was like pretty good. Like he'd go to all the competitions and stuff. But man, kids were cruel back then. Some kids were so fucking cruel. They'd be like, "You're a figure skater, haha." I was never the kid who got picked on though. I wasn't one of the kids who got picked on. I was definitely one of the kids in grade school who certain kids decided they hated. But that was different from being somebody who gets picked on. Somebody gets picked on as somebody who like more than one person doesn't like him. And I had never had like more than one person not like me. But this other kid who they picked on a lot was Royal Smith. And I felt really bad for him because he was this fat kid. And for some reason, he didn't shower. Or at least he smelled like he didn't shower because he had this like smell and this like sliminess all over him. And when kids would like grab him, like touch him, like playing tag football or whatever, they'd be like, "We got slimed by Royal." And he'd get like really upset. Like one time he got really upset and was banging his head against the door. But he was my friend because we had choir together. And we sat next to each other in choir. And I think we were even like helper bees together in like a girls' choir for a little while. As if you need 2 helper bees. It was like covering a requirement. That's another thing that's fucked up about school. You do classes you don't need to take just for some requirement. I mean, fuck requirements. But yeah, I remember once Kid Lawless slammed him up against the... Because he was kind of a short kid. He wasn't like physically big. Slammed him up against the lockers. And then in class, in choir, he comes up to me and he's like, "I can't believe you did that, Kyle." I was like, "What?" "I can't believe you let Ken slam me up against the locker. You just walked away." And I was like, "Oh." And I go, "Well, I don't like to fight. I'd rather run away than fight." But in retrospect, that was kind of bad. I shouldn't have done that. But yeah, in 7th grade, who did I hang out with? Dew at the very beginning. And then Chris Jenkins, who was Moses Jenkins before that, he was actually my neighbor. Lived like a block up from me, who I hung out with. And he had these 2 older sisters, or like 3 older sisters. And I think he went to like Uni Hill. But I mainly hung out with him because he was a neighbor. And then, I hung out with him for a little bit because he was friends with this Ethiopian kid. And we hung out with him for a little bit. I didn't really hang out with the same people for more than like a few weeks, and then I'd hang out by myself again, but like we ditched school with him once, an Ethiopian guy. After lunch, we just left school and like roamed around out of time.